Hi, I'm Naomi Hall, and I'd like to welcome you to our virtual summit on stress management for educators. My whole goal with this summit is to provide powerful steps for you to reduce your stress and be able to find quality time for yourself and for your family. Because when you're stressed and overwhelmed, that just isn't there. So today, I have Mike Anderson with me, and he has been an educator for more than 25 years. He's been a public school teacher for 15 years, and he's also taught preschool, coached swim lessons, and taught university graduate level classes. So he's taught all ages. And now he works as a consultant providing professional learning for teachers throughout the US and beyond. So, Mike, welcome. So, I'm so glad to have you with us today.
Thank you, Naomi. I'm so excited to be here. This is such an important topic.
Mhm. Yeah. So, you first off have the firsthand experience of the stress of an educator. And then as a consultant, you are seeing educators across the nation. So tell me a little bit about what you're seeing with stress in our educators today.
Yeah, so I've been thinking about this for a long time, and I know I wrote a book about this years ago, and that stemmed from my own challenges with work-life balance.
Mm,
When I was a new teacher, I was overwhelmed and swamped, but I kind of thought, well, you're supposed to be, but I also thought it would get better.
mhm,
Um, and it was fine to be stressed out and overwhelmed when it was just me and my cat. But when I had a family and my children were young, I really felt myself starting to burn out
mhm,
because I'd had this idea that being a teacher would make me a better parent and being a parent would make me a better teacher. But instead, it felt like they were doing this.
mhm,
And I was really struggling with that. So I did tons of work and research around that. And that ended up turning into a book. Um, and I think what I was feeling when I was in the classroom is something that has only been accelerating as of late. And it's about a loss of control in the classroom. What I'm seeing a lot of teachers struggling with in a lot of schools that I'm working with is either they feel like kids' behaviors are really challenging and they don't know what to do about it. They don't always feel like they're being supported by administrators. They're not always sure how parents are going to react if they bring that issue to parents. Um, and this was something that was happening when I was in the classroom, but it's way worse now. More and more teachers are being handed programs and curricula they're supposed to teach.
mhm.
I see this especially at the elementary level, although it's happening some at the middle school, a little less so at the high school level. But when you're just handed a book and said, this is what you're supposed to do, like, how can you be fired up and passionate about teaching something that you didn't create? And oftentimes, teachers are being handed these curriculum materials that don't necessarily match what their kids need or who their kids are.
Mhm.
And if they feel like they don't have power and control over what they're teaching or how they're teaching it, that's what leads to burnout. Like it's the sense of a loss of autonomy and helplessness. When you feel like you don't know what to do and you don't know how to get your way out of the challenge, that's when burnout really hits hard, I think.
Mhm. And that totally makes sense because I was more on the high school level. So I had a little more autonomy with what I taught. I had the here's your syllabus and here's the modules you have to do and here are a couple books to pick from. And so I had more of that autonomy. So I definitely see that difference having also been an administrator within the K to 8, and it is here you go, you're using this for phonics, you're using this for math, you're using this for yeah.
Yeah, and I'm reading a really interesting book right now about toughness
Mhm.
called Do Hard Things by Steve Magnus.
Okay.
He's an elite athlete. He coaches elite athletes, and he says that as a society, we've gotten toughness wrong.
Mm,
He's especially talking about people who coach and teach. That the way you teach toughness is by yelling and screaming at people and making them throw up after a football practice.
mm,
And in fact, he says it's actually the reverse. It's about empathy and relationship building and giving people autonomy. And one of the things I just read the other day that's really struck me is he was talking about burnout.
mm,
And he said the number one cause of burnout is helplessness. It's
mm.
when you don't have autonomy, when you don't have power and control,
Mhm.
that's when you give up.
Yep.
And I think, we're adopting these programs and curricula in education for the best, with the best of intentions. We're trying to make sure kids get the skills they need. We're trying to give teachers the supports they need. But man, if you just give somebody, say, this is what you're supposed to do and this is how you're supposed to do it, and you can't deviate from it, we're going to have teachers emotionally disconnecting from school. And I see that happening in a lot of places.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's so much of what I focus on in my coaching is there are so many things beyond our control in the field of education, but there are things that we can control. So let's focus on the controllable pieces. And just getting that bit back and realizing there are things that you can control can make such a difference.
Well, and even with those prescriptive programs, in my experience, it is rare that there's actually somebody saying to teachers, you're not allowed to deviate from this. I think sometimes teachers feel that that's what they've been told, because often they get these really murky, confusing messages, like, this is the new math program. We've spent a lot of time in research looking into this. The program says you need to have fidelity to the program.
Mhm.
I think fidelity is the new F word in education, by the way.
Yeah.
And so, you need to do it, but then they're told, but then, you know your kids best. So if you think there are modifications, if you see something needs to be changed, make that change. And I think that's hard for teachers. What they hear is fidelity, you've got to do this. And they worry they're going to get in trouble if they don't teach the program as is. But in my experience, that is rare that someone actually wants teachers to be robots. They really do want teachers to use professional discretion. So that's something that I think as educators, we could work out a little bit, is how do we take the structure and framework of that program, still teach the content and the skills that are there, but make modifications so that it's better. If the math program calls for 30 straight minutes of direct instruction to 8-year-olds, that's bad.
Mm-hmm.
Teach it in 8 and then get them up and get them moving and have them do something.
Yep.
Yeah. So I think that's something that as educators, we could think about is how do we take those programs and find out what autonomy we do have within them? Because I think we do often have a lot more than we think we do.
Yeah. So much is in our head of what we think people are telling us versus, and when you actually, someone brought this to my attention of just asking who said, like, who actually said that? You're like, well, actually, nobody has said that to me. Yeah.
They said, we often say that. Well, they said we're supposed to, but that's a great question. Who's they?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. Well, so it's interesting. When I was teaching in the classroom and I was teaching in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, we adopted a math program. I was teaching 4th and 5th grades. The district purchased a program for the entire district to use. And at first I was excited because it meant that all the lessons were right there and I didn't have to make everything and create everything myself. But very quickly, I found myself losing my joy of teaching math, because how do you get excited about something you didn't create? And so I went to the math consultant and I said, hey, Terry, I got a question for you. Do I actually have to teach every lesson just as it's written in here? Or if I've got a better way to teach that, can I do that? Like, can I find a more hands-on way of still teaching the skills? And her response was like, oh, that's what we want people to do.
Yeah.
Like, we want people to take this and use it as the starting point,
Mm-hmm.
but no one's going to get in trouble for doing something better than what's in the math book.
Mm-hmm.
The key is you still have to teach what's in the book. Like, what you have to be careful about is, as an educator, you can't say, well, I don't really understand this new way of teaching division, so I'll just teach it the way I know how to teach it and just won't. Like, that's the line we have to figure out how to maneuver, is to really teach the concepts in the program, but not necessarily exactly as it's written.
Yeah, that's a good differentiation. So you wrote The Well-Balanced Teacher, and with this in mind of like the stress and all of that, but that was a while ago and you're rewriting it. So why is the rewrite necessary?
Yeah, so it's really interesting. When I first wrote that book, I wasn't even intending to write a book. At first, I was just trying to find my way out of my own struggles as a young parent with young children and a classroom. And the book just sort of happened once I'd collected enough information and talked to enough people. 15 years later, it is still sort of ticking away and selling year after year after year. But I've learned so much more since I wrote that book. And I think some things have also changed and shifted in education, not just COVID, but lots of other things. And so I recently started working at rewriting that book. And the main goal of this book is to emphasize the 6 intrinsic motivators that I wrote about in Tackling the Motivation Crisis, which is a book all about how do we as teachers help make sure that the academic work for kids is really awesome, so that we don't have to bribe them with gimmicks like pizza parties and gem jars to get them to do work. How do we make sure the work is compelling? And I outlined 6 intrinsic motivators we can tap into. And then I realized those are the exact same intrinsic motivators that we as educators need. And so that's really what this rewrite is all about. It's sort of bringing the book up to date and recentering it around these 6 psychological needs that all people have.
Okay. So can you tell us a little bit about these intrinsic motivators?
Yeah, so autonomy is about the need for power and control.
Mm.
If we have power and control over what we're doing or how we're doing it, we can be much more engaged. And if we have no control, that's what leads to helplessness. That's what leads to burnout. Another one is competence, which means that we need to feel competent at what we're doing. We need to see ourselves, we need to understand and recognize our successes and see ourselves growing and getting better. If we think we're bad at what we do, even if we're wrong, like a great teacher who thinks they're not good will suffer from burnout, because it's really hard to stay engaged with something if you feel unsuccessful with it. So we need to nurture our sense of competence. Purpose is another one. I'm one of those people who's not real good at doing what I'm supposed to do unless I understand the why behind it. And when we know the why, and when the why makes sense to us, we can throw our heart and soul into something. Another one is belonging, the need to feel like a part of an organization, to have colleagues who we can lean on, who we can work with, to feel like we're part of a community is a real important intrinsic motivator. And then the last 2 are curiosity and fun. And curiosity is about finding the things that we find naturally curious about, the things we're interested in, and finding ways of weaving those into our teaching. And then fun is about, I think, both sort of deep engagement, but also just like light goofiness. We need to remember to enjoy our students and let our students see us enjoy teaching. I don't know if you're watching Ted Lasso. I'm a
I need
huge
to. Everyone keeps telling me about it.
Oh my gosh, there's so much to learn there about great teaching and learning. And I actually wrote a blog post all about the power of dad jokes based on some of the goofy dad jokes that come up in Ted Lasso.
Yep.
We need to find ways of sprinkling lightness and humor into our daily work with kids. It's so important. So those 6 intrinsic motivators are the ones that I'm really thinking a lot about as I'm working on this new version of the book.
Yep. And as you listed those, I was thinking, oh my goodness, so many of those have really taken a hard hit in the educational culture. Like that autonomy, the competence. I'm going to be doing some workshops on confidence, because educators' confidence is just taking this constant hit from all sides. Like they're getting hit by parents, by administrators, by in the news, like it's on every side, but yet our educators are so highly trained and qualified.
It's funny you say that, because one of my draft chapter titles for this book is Recover Your Swagger. And it's about our need for competence and purpose. Like, how do we make sure that we are walking into school feeling like, yeah, I know what I'm doing and I'm good at this and I got this. Or even if we're still struggling, I don't think it's a good goal to eliminate stress from teaching. Like, because part of the stress is often what makes it worthwhile. Struggling with kids who are having a hard time, figuring out a new way to teach something when kids aren't getting it. But it's almost impossible to recover from stress if we don't feel good about what we're doing. And so that's the key, is to recognize our success and to get a pathway to getting better at the things we're struggling with. Like, I was working with a group of teachers in Virginia once. I'd worked with them the previous year and we were continuing our work the next year. And in the second year, in about October, November, I was meeting with them, and their whole affect was different than it had been the year before. The year before, they were beaten down, frustrated, grumping about kids, upset all the time. And in the second year, there was just a lightness about them that was really striking me. And I said, hey, you all remember how hard last fall was? Do you have easier classes this year? Like, you just seem like your energy is so much higher. And they said, actually, our kids are harder this year. We're still really struggling, but now we feel like we have strategies and we know what to do about it. So it was the knowing what to do, having ideas of things to try, that was enabling them to still have really strong motivation and an upbeat spirit,
Yep.
even as they were continuing to work with kids who came to school with lots of challenges. That's not going away.
Yep. And that's what I want to see for our educators is for some, maybe it is time to leave education, and that's fine. Like for some people it is. But I think a lot of people feel like they have no option but to leave. And I want them to know there's hope. There's healing. There's stuff that we can do so that you can be like those teachers that you just talked about where it's still hard. Our job's never going to be easy, but it can be enjoyable. You don't have to be burnt out. So, what do you recommend for teachers? Like, where do they need to start this journey? Because it is like, I know for me, it has been a journey to finding healing and balance again.
And as we would say in my hometown of Auburn, Maine, it's wicked hard.
Yeah.
Like, it's a hard profession. Like, if you thought you were going into teaching to like just sort of float through the day and have summers off, like, bad call. It's really hard. So thinking about those 6 intrinsic motivators, one thing teachers might do is a little bit of a self-audit. Which of those 6 intrinsic motivators are actually feeling pretty okay right now, and which ones are in deficit? Because chances are, you've got some really fun colleagues that you enjoy, and you've got a sense of belonging and fun there. Maybe it's this overly scripted curricula that's bringing you down. Oh, so those are the things to maybe think about. So that's one idea, is to do just a quick check-in. Which of those 6 intrinsic motivators feel strong, which ones don't? And then to avoid the temptation to look for one-time event fixes. I think that the key to long-time health and balance in the profession is to create habits that in a small way give us a daily dose of these intrinsic motivators so that they pile up over time. It's sort of like if you're struggling with exercise and you're struggling with weight and you want to lose some weight, like the worst thing you could do would be to say, okay, I'm going to set a goal of losing 20 pounds and I'm going to run a marathon. Let's say you do it. Great. You checked it off. You ran the marathon. If that didn't lead to a habit that's sustainable, what happens 3 months after you've run the marathon? If you're not running anymore, you're right back where you were before. I think this is the mistake schools make sometimes with teacher health and balance, is they think Teacher Appreciation Week is the cure. Like, we'll give everyone a coffee mug and throw people a party and give them a nice lunch, and that'll boost everyone's spirits. We need to be finding small habits, small daily rituals and routines that allow us to build these things up over time. So for example, with competence, one really small thing teachers could do is at the end of every day, write down one small success in a journal. Could be a document on your computer, could be an old-fashioned like paper journal. Just write down one thing that went well. If you think of 2, sure, write down 2, but the goal is to write at least 1. That doesn't seem like a lot, and it's not. But after a school year, you've got 180 successes that you can look back at and reflect on. And especially after you have that rough parent phone call or the staff meeting that doesn't go well, you can look back at that and remember, oh yeah, there's a lot good going on here. So that's an example of a small habit that someone might take on. Another example from my own experience was in one school I was working with, I struggled with finding my peeps, my colleagues who were like-minded, who had good energy. We had a tough adult climate in one school I taught in. But I did find one. Her name is Cindy. And we made it a habit that every Wednesday morning, we went out to a diner and had breakfast together. And that was just, we didn't have to call each other. We didn't have to say, are we going to go this week? It was just Wednesday was breakfast at the diner. And it was such a nice, small habit that every week I knew I was going to have 45 minutes with my buddy Cindy, and we could talk about school. We could talk about other stuff. A little breakfast once a week doesn't sound like a big deal, but boy, was it, because that helped me get through some other tough times during the week, no doubt.
Yeah, you've got to have your people.
Yeah, and so creating habits and rituals that allow you to connect with those people, like set up a book club, do a walking, like every day after school, go walk for 15 minutes. As soon as the buses go, put on your sneakers, walk around the block with a friend. Like, find little ways of building in habits so that you can nurture those intrinsic motivators that you need. I think that's the key.
That That's so important. And I think you're right, because the more study I do, and we know the word like self-care is like a swear word now in education, because those one-time things
Yeah.
don't work. You feel good for the moment, but you've got, like you're saying, you've got to build those habits and those routines. That's why, in another interview that I did, the whole interview, John Finn, he is focused on habits and habit formation. And he says, these tips, tricks, and techniques don't work because they're not creating a habit.
Right. That's
So,
the key.
yeah,
That's
yeah,
the key. Like if you want healthy teeth, you don't brush your teeth once a month
right.
for a really long time.
Yeah.
No, 2 minutes in the morning, 2 minutes in the evening, and that's the key. And so I think that's something that teachers can do. And so this is another exercise teachers might try,
Mhm.
is to look at their daily habits, to
Mhm.
actually write down what are the things that I do kind of automatically every day, and then to assess which ones are positive.
Mm.
They help me have a better day.
Mhm.
Which ones are negative? We all have them. And which ones are neutral? They don't seem one way or the other. And then that can be a way to start to say, oh, what are some habits I might shift?
Mhm.
So a classic example is people who buy coffee on the way to work. If you buy coffee in the car on the way to work, if you're stopping at a Starbucks, what are you paying, $5 or $7
Mhm.
every single morning for a coffee?
Yep.
You could make your own coffee at home for 50 cents. And
Mhm.
if you say, put in some cream and sugar, have you ever looked at how much cream and sugar go into those coffees when someone else makes them?
Yeah.
If you make your own coffee at home, you could put in half the cream, half the sugar, spend 50 cents instead of $5. Think about the compounding of that over
Mhm.
time.
Yep.
Um, it's healthier, it's better for your budget. So making a list of all of your daily habits
Mhm.
can be a really good way to sort of ferret out what are the little habits that I want to get rid of, what are some habits I want to build in, what are some habits I can tweak.
Mhm.
Because I think sometimes when we say, all right, I want to make my life better, we think we have to make a giant change.
Yeah.
I'm going to start working out every day. I'm going to go to the gym for an hour. Well, going to the gym for an hour is really a 2 hour commitment because you got to get there, you got to change, you got to shower afterwards, you got to get home. It's not sustainable. You don't have 2 hours in your day that you're not doing something. But if you wanted to exercise a little bit more, putting on your sneakers and walking for 15 minutes a day right after school, that'll really pile up. And the small habit you keep is way better than the big habit you don't.
Yep. With that walking one, I have started doing this and I actually love it. Um, because I'm inside so much, and especially now that we're finally in weather that we can actually get outside. Lunch, I have been taking my lunch outside and just walking while I eat my lunch. And I'm like, it gets me movement, it gets me sunshine, it gets me my lunch, it gets me fresh air, and just that peaceful time disconnected from technology. And
Yes.
it's like I'm hitting so many different things with that one step of just walking outside while I eat my lunch.
It's a great, great example of a really small habit that can have these huge benefits. Yeah, one of the things that I've started doing because I'm a full-time consultant now and I'm often working in multiple schools in a week is I bring my sneakers and running clothes with me.
Mhm.
And after I finish at a school, unless I've run in the hotel gym in the morning,
Mhm.
and I hate running on treadmills, so I try not to. I bring my running clothes, and as soon as I'm done consulting for the day, I go into the staff bathroom, I change, and I go for a run right from the school.
Nice.
Because if I try to wait until I go back to the hotel,
Mhm.
oftentimes by the time I get there, I'm tired, I'm getting hungry, it's close to dinner. But if I just run right after school, I get it done. And
Yep.
so that's a habit I've taken on recently that's been really fun.
I love it. That's perfect. And then you're getting like different scenery every time you run.
This is totally goofy, but one of the things that I do is I bring one pair of sneakers with me when I travel. It's like my travel sneakers. And I now write in Sharpie along the sole of the shoe the states that I've run
That's
in those
awesome.
shoes.
Yep.
So yeah, New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Colorado, Utah, Florida, Alabama, Georgia, and 4 New England states are all on. Oh, and Ohio. Got in Ohio when I went to pick up my daughter from college.
That's
Uh,
awesome.
yeah, so that's another example of a way that I'm weaving a little bit of fun into my
Yep.
exercise routine. Like in addition to having music when I run, which keeps it fun, It's also like, it's in a goofy way motivating for me to bring my sneakers to a new state so that I can run in a new state and add the state. We got to find these little ways of making things fun and joyful, I think.
Oh, for sure. For sure. Yeah, you've got to have the fun. And that's part of what I loved about teaching is having fun with the students, like laughing with them, laughing at their goofiness, and not letting it like throw me. It's just we're all having a good time, we're all learning, we're all laughing. And they're so much more receptive when
Yes.
you're able to laugh together.
Just the other day, I was observing in a first grade classroom, and the kids were gathering together on the rug. Some kids were still putting away snacks. So it was this little, in between transition time. And I just heard one little boy lean over to another and say, "Do you know chickens have mohawks?" I thought, that's awesome. I'm writing that down. Chickens do have mohawks. Like, we got to be like just paying attention and listening to our kids and enjoying those things when they come up.
Yep.
And that's what brings us fun energy to keep going.
Yeah. And even the big kids say funny things. I used to keep I kept like a journal of the funny things my kids said, because even the seniors in AP environmental science like said some of the funniest things.
Uh-huh. So there's another example of a habit that teachers might take on if what they're feeling is a lack of joy, a lack of fun in the classroom, is to have a little journal where they write down goofy things that kids say. Not only do you end up with this fun collection of goofy things that you'll enjoy, but it'll force you to train your ear on what kids are saying. You start looking out for it and paying attention for it. And you know that old saying, like, if you want to find something, the best way, is to look for it.
Mhm.
We often find what we're seeking.
Yes.
Well, if we spend all of our time waiting for kids to be rude and disrespectful and expecting kids to say something horrible, then we're keyed into it, and that's what we're hearing, and that's what we're noticing. What if we shifted that and we said, let me pay attention to the goofy, funny things kids are saying, and I'm going to focus on that instead? How might that shift our energy in the day?
And that even goes for like the people we surround ourselves with, the finding your peeps. Like sometimes we need to change our peeps because we're in the group of like they're fantastic people, but it's the group of people that are always venting. Not that we don't
Uh-huh.
need to sometimes, but if that's what you're always around, like you got to find the people that are going to lift you up and fill your bucket.
Yeah, because there's a great sense of belonging that can be built through negative talk.
Mhm.
Like, that's why we do it. It feels good to vent and have somebody else go, yeah. And then they say something about kids these days, and we go, yeah, like we're in it together. We're meeting our need for belonging in a really negative way. And if we recognize we've got into that pattern, then one thing we might need to do is shift who we're hanging with
Mhm.
and, hang out with the people who are talking positively about kids and who've got a joyful spirit, because there's no doubt that impacts how we feel.
It does, absolutely. Well, this has been fantastic. And I understand you have a free gift for our audience. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
I do. I'm going to send you a link to a live binder of resources. It's an online binder that is free and public and copyable. So people can take that link and send it to whoever they want. You don't need to create a password or put in an email address to get access to it. You just click in the link and it's there. There are books and articles and videos and all kinds of different resources about teacher health and balance there. And it's something that I'm continually adding to. In fact, this is making me think I need to add this new book I'm reading right now to the book list in there because it's awesome. Yeah, so I hope people take advantage of that and go explore. There's some really great resources in there.
Oh, that's fantastic. I'm excited to take a look myself. Um,
Sure.
and you also offer some courses. So can you tell us about the courses that you offer for teachers?
Sure. When I was stuck in this office for 12 straight months in the heart of the pandemic, one of the things that I did was created a series of online asynchronous courses for teachers. So teachers would have some different ways of getting some professional learning when we were all in that virtual world for a while. And part of what I did was I created something called the Beat Teacher Burnout Institute.
Mm.
It's one really short free course that's sort of an introduction, and it's about the importance of like health and balance, like why is it so important for us to be healthy and balanced as teachers, and about the power of habits. And then there are 4 other short courses that follow that each focus on different elements of health and balance. Our
Mhm.
physical, and emotional health and balance, as well as those 6 intrinsic motivators that I was talking
Mhm.
about earlier. And so that's a really great resource that people could check out too.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you so much. Those sound like great resources. So I just have a couple quick questions that I like to end with that are just fun questions. So I would like to know, what are you reading? What are you watching? And what are you listening to?
Well, I think you've already heard 2 of those, because I'm about 2/3 of the way through Do Hard Things by Steve Magnus, a really, really cool book about toughness and developing toughness. I am totally hooked on Ted Lasso, and we just watched the second to last episode last night, and I'm so glad that they're ending this show before it gets old, and
Mhm.
so sad that the show is about to end
Yes.
because it's so incredible. Um, and one of my favorite podcasts is the Baseball Tonight podcast.
Oh, okay.
I'm a huge baseball fan,
Yep.
and that's sort of my escapism. Is I'll put on a podcast when I'm gardening or when I'm going for a walk or even when I'm falling asleep in the evening, and
Mhm.
that's what I'm listening to right now.
Those are great. I am definitely gonna have to check out Ted Lasso because I keep hearing from everybody how good it is. So,
I I can't in a time in which our world seems so fractured and we just seem to be so struggling as a society in so many ways, to have a show that celebrates forgiveness and joy and kindness and relationship and mental health is so amazing. It's worth it.
we need it. We need it for
Yep.
sure. Well, thank you. And I want to thank our audience for joining us. This has been great. We have several other interviews. If this is the first one you've caught, make sure you catch the other ones because they're all filled with practical tips like this of the steps that you can start to take. And they're just little steps. You don't have to take huge steps to start managing your stress and finding joy in your job again. There is hope, there is healing. You can remain in education and find that joy that you started out with when you entered the field. So thank you for joining us. And Mike, thank you for your input. And I look forward to seeing your book come out.
You're welcome. Thanks so much for having me. This was a really fun conversation.
It was. Have a good day, everybody.